Hi, everyone. Welcome to Brain Talks. I'm Deborah Kan, founder of Being Patient. Today, we're going to talk to Marty Reiswig. Marty's family is one of few who has a familial gene that predisposes them to early onset Alzheimer's. Marty himself doesn't know what his genetic predisposition is. He's made that choice not to know for the moment, but his family's been hugely impacted by early onset. So we're so happy and fortunate to have him share his story. Marty, thanks so much for joining us and welcome.
This is my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
So can you tell us a little bit first about, we're talking about a very rare gene called PRESN2, I should say, which doesn't impact, there's only, I think, 643 families who have been impacted, who have this gene that we know of so far. Tell us who in your family has been impacted and what it really means to have this.
Yeah, thank you. So my grandpa Ralph became symptomatic with Alzheimer's in his mid-40s, and he was dead by the year that I was born. So my father has very few positive memories with his dad. He actually was very symptomatic by the time that my dad was only 8 years old. And so you know how Alzheimer's can really change people and give you a pretty rough personality at times. And so those are unfortunately the memories my dad has of his father. But my grandpa and his generation is kind of what raised the red flag because my grandpa had 13 siblings, and of those 14 kids in that family, 10 of them ended up getting early onset Alzheimer's by the age of 50.
Wow, that is remarkable. That's a scary statistic to have. What we only recently, in recent years, learned about the early onset markers. So tell me a little bit about your family's experience in learning about this genetic predisposition.
So actually, my grandmother, who was married to Grandpa Ralph, who was getting sick, she was a determined Spitfire woman, and she took him all over creation to try to find somebody who could tell her what was wrong with him. And she got all kinds of bad diagnoses and bad advice and things like that, but they simply didn't understand it at the time. And so my understanding of it is a strange story. So I was raised far from my dad's side of the family. We live in Colorado, and most of them are in Oklahoma and Kansas. And so, you know, as a kid, out of sight, out of mind, right? Yeah. And I just knew that Alzheimer's ran in our family, but it was not a clear and present threat. Well, I decided in college to take my girlfriend to a family reunion and go and meet these people. And I'd only seen them a couple times in my life before that. And so we got there, we arrived and pulled into a local pizza joint, and we said our hellos and things like that. And a few minutes later, my Uncle Roy and his family pulled up and came into the pizza place. And he reached for the back of his chair to sit down. He reached for it over and over and over. And then he was finally able to grasp it and pull it out. And when he went to sit down, he nearly fell. And I didn't understand. And I looked around the table and I just saw fear and shock and anger and shame because everybody around the family table knew what was happening. And so we later went to the gymnasium with the family reunion and all these people. And it was just very evident that this was a massive problem. And so I took my girlfriend out for a walk that night, and I told her, I said, hey, if you want out of this relationship right now, I will understand. And without skipping a beat, she said, I'd rather have 30 good years with you than a lifetime with anyone else. And so
that you ended up marrying that girlfriend, I presume.
Yes, ma'am. I'd be crazy not to.
Yeah. So when was it that you found out that you had did members of your family participate in any trials? Like, how did you, it wasn't until recently that we know that there's really three variants. It's PRESN1 and 2 and APP that mean that it severely elevates your risk of early onset Alzheimer's. Those are called the early onset genes. So how did you find out that your family was a carrier of PRESN2?
Yeah, so at that family reunion, clearly it became a very real problem. But you're right, that was before the human genome was mapped in the late 90s. And so as science has progressed and followed our families and taken blood samples and things for the last couple of generations, they really began diving into the Human Genome Project and discovered it at that time. But I was a young adult and young and married and having kids. And so one of my distant cousins, my dad's first cousin, who we call an escapee when somebody's in our family but does not get the gene mutation, he's an escapee. And so he lived long enough to be the caregiver for all kinds of people in his family, including younger people. And he wrote a book chronicling our disease and the science development at the time. And at the back of the book, he referenced the Diane study. And so we contacted them, and we learned at that time that this was not just something that was hereditary. This is an actual gene mutation that each new generation has a 50-50 chance of receiving that gene mutation. And if you get that gene mutation in our family, or presenilin 1 or presenilin 2, you are 99.5% guaranteed to get Alzheimer's if you live to the age of 40 or 50.
And you've decided, Marty, not for the moment to find out. Why is that?
Yeah, honestly, if it was just me by myself on the planet, I would absolutely want to know. But it's not. I'm married and I have kids, and I have a mother who has dealt with her own husband having Alzheimer's the last 15 years. And so for now, there's nothing more that I could do. I'm already involved in research. I'm already involved in advocacy. I'm doing everything I possibly can already. And so I'm actually kind of living as if I have it. I'm choosing to take vacations. I'm choosing to, live with no regrets. And so really right now, I'm deciding not to find out, just because I don't need the rest of my family to bear a burden that, frankly, we might not have to bear yet. Now, as I get closer to our family's age of onset, as I get closer to 45, 47 years old, I'll probably want to know to make sure that I can put all of the insurances in place and, take the wild, around the world trip I want to take and things like that. But for now, Alzheimer's is not stealing much joy. And so why allow it to steal more than it is already?
Do you mind sharing your age with us, Marty, right now?
Yeah, so I'm 40.
Okay, so you're 40. You just hit the 40s. Happy birthday. Congratulations.
Yeah. Thanks a lot.
We have a question from one of our viewers coming in, which takes what you were saying just a little bit farther. And she's asked, what kind of counseling have you had knowing that this could happen to you? And how has it changed your outlook on life? You touched on that a little bit, but she's asking a little bit more. Do you have a bucket list that you're currently fulfilling?
Right. Yeah. Great questions. So the first one is, I do have a casual kind of relationship with a counselor right now. I only go and see her when I'm having really tough time. It is most difficult when I'm visiting my father because I look at him and I'm sad for him, and then I'm sad for my mom. But then very quickly I just see myself, and my own possible future. And that's, scary and sad. And so I do go see her on sort of an as needed basis. As far as how it's changed my outlook, I know this is going to sound really strange and possibly just made up, but I promise you it's not. So being faced with your own real mortality on a regular basis, it's different than having a car accident where all of a sudden your life flashes before your eyes, but you survive the car accident. I'm sure that changes your life, but also being faced with this on a regular basis has actually made me much more intentional to really stop and think about life and living with no regrets and making good intentional choices with my time, energy, and money. And so the silver lining about all of this is actually, I think it's actually made me a better person. In a very strange and morbid way. And it turns out this was actually a very popular philosophy in the 1600s and 1700s that permeated the entire society and art and fiction and literature at the time. And it's called Memento Mori. And it says, remember, you will die. And so if you are on a consistent basis reminding yourself that you are going to pass away, it very quickly begs the question, well, then how are you going to live? What are you living for? And are you actually in congruence with yourself and your choices and your values? So in a strange way, it actually has positively impacted my life. There's a great saying, if you don't mind me taking a couple extra seconds, and it's a Confucius quote, and I hope I can get it right. It says, we all have two lives. The second begins when you realize you only have one.
That's a great quote.
And that hits the nail on the head. I've realized I only have one life. And it's different though than, not to belittle this in any way, but it's a little different than getting like a stage 4 cancer diagnosis because A, there's no treatment yet for Alzheimer's that's effective that I've found. And B, it's not like right now, like I'm not dying in the next 4 months. Right. So I can't just like quit my job and just travel the world. I still have to get up every day and raise my kids and provide for my family. And, so it actually has affected a day in and day out kind of relationship with death that is, it was tough at first, but has actually turned into kind of a healthy and positive relationship.
Tell us a little bit, Marty, about the research studies that you're participating. I know that you are participating, I believe, in some clinical trials or studies. What has that been like, and what are they looking for? Do you feel like you're contributing? Just take us a little bit through that experience.
Yeah, so as I mentioned in the back of that book from my cousin, he mentioned the Diane study, and my brother and I decided to enroll, and we were like the 8th and 9th person to join that study. And now it's 900 people worldwide that they are studying observationally. The observational study has been going on for 9 years, and the drug trial has been going on for about 5 years. And we're going to be getting results from that at the end of 2019, and hoping to see some positive results. But as far as what they set out to learn in the observational study, they've actually been they have actually exceeded their goals in what they wanted to learn and discover. What they've basically been able to learn, and much of what you now know and the population now knows about the actual disease, has been discovered from the Diane observational study. And the reason for that is they can take our blood and we've been doing spinal taps every year, each of us, for all of these years, as well as all of our medications and our lifestyle and all kinds of things, and brain scans and stuff like that. So a couple of key things that they have learned, and it's why science is now focused on early detection, early prevention, is because what they've learned from our cerebral spinal fluid is that our gene mutation causes our bodies to overproduce and not clear out the beta amyloid protein in our cerebral spinal fluid that goes up into the brain and then gets cleared out. Everyone has a normal level of this. Okay, think of it like a sink. If you turn on the faucet and the sink drain works correctly, then you could just run that all day, every day, and it wouldn't overflow. It wouldn't cause any problems. Well, that's what the normal body does. Our gene mutation causes those either the faucet to be on too high. Actually, the faucet is on too high. We have too much beta amyloid being produced. But could we improve the clearing of it? Could we improve the drain, or could we turn down the faucet? And so it turns out that just because our gene mutation causes that elevated level of beta amyloid, doesn't mean that our disease is any different than the general population. So later on in life, people are having elevated levels of beta amyloid, and that protein is staying in the sink too long, in the brain too long, and finally it's a sticky protein. So it actually folds and sticks and becomes those tangles that you see when you look at an Alzheimer's brain under a scan. So that's the technical side of it.
Yeah, and I want to now talk a little bit about the lifestyle, because, research now is moving more and more deeper into the fact that there are things, lifestyle changes, that can be made to improve the health of your brain. A lot of these topics we're covering on Brain Talks, on Being Patient, that say, research is really saying, what can we do today? We might not, once the brain goes into a degenerative state, there's very little you could do to reverse that today. But more and more science is proving that there are things that we can do today to keep our brains healthier. So I just want your response to that, because are you changing things in your life? Are you doing yoga? Are you meditating? Have you changed your diet? Have you made big lifestyle changes with your brain in mind?
Lucky for me, I didn't have to make a lot of large changes. I was practically born an athlete. And so I love physical exercise. A recent study actually included some of the Diane findings as well, and found that even among gene mutation carriers and the general population, that basically 30 minutes a day of exercise, but not more than 2 hours a day of exercise, that's kind of the sweet spot that actually helps to keep the brain a little bit more clear of those plaques and tangles for longer. It's really about staving off the disease and delaying it as much as possible. And on top of that, they've also learned that the brain continues to actually grow new synapses. If you learn a new language, if you learn an instrument, if you have a job that continues to keep you mentally stimulated, you are learning and creating new synapses. So Dr. Bateman, the head of the Diane study, likes to say that basically what you're doing is improving the bucket, you're expanding the bucket of synapses that Alzheimer's will eventually want to start draining out. Well, if you start with a bucket this big, your Alzheimer's is going to go quicker. But if you can have a big, active, healthy brain, it can go a lot slower and actually kind of delay those symptoms. And so, yes, I do have a general keto diet. What's good for the heart is good for the brain, guys. That's simple as that. So a good, healthy, balanced diet and exercise, and then just staying very active with your brain are those three things that I've seen over and over that do prove out to help delay.
I think, Marty, can you hear me clearly? It seemed like the connection is freezing out a little. Oh, you're back.
Oh, okay. Yes, I can hear you clearly.
You're back. We have another, this is a really great question that's coming in, which says, as a parent of young adults who are at risk, how can I best support them as they try to make the decision about whether to learn about their genetic status? They're at risk because of the other parent. So that's a great question. How do you guide your children? What are you going to say to your children when they become young adults? And what if you don't find out and your kids want to know? Like, how would you advise them?
Yeah, one of the most amazing things that I am a part of with all of this is we were able to start a very private Facebook group of all of us. We call each other the X-Men because we're mutants trying to save the world. And so one of the things that comes up on a regular basis is, how do we speak to our children about this, right? Can you still hear me okay?
Yep, we can hear you loud and clear.
And actually, there's a very great correlation between our situation, because it's very genetic, and what is that other neurodegenerative disease?
Parkinson's?
No, it's a lot like Parkinson's. but it's totally genetic. It's not Lewy body disease. Anyway, Lou Gehrig's disease.
Lou Gehrig, I was going to say, yeah, ALS.
And ALS is directly the same. It's a 50-50 chance for everybody. And so what the research has found among social workers about ALS is the earlier everyone is talking about it and the more open everyone is discussing it, it actually negatively impacts the children a lot less the earlier and the more honest everyone is, and everyone is supportive about what's going on. If you hold off and wait and act like it doesn't exist, and then suddenly drop this bomb on your kids that, hey, by the way, now that you're married and getting ready to have kids or have a child, we have this gene mutation, it's really damaging to the relationship. They feel like you've been lying to them all of these years. So we have chosen, kind of like with the birds and the bees, we've kind of chosen to tell our kids what is age appropriate, and really not dwell on it, but honestly answer their questions as they come in. I think there's a really sweet protection almost that children have in their brain to not think too deeply about things. And they don't even think that they're ever going to be 40 or 50 years old.
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
So as they feel more and more inclined, we just want our kids to know we are an open book, and we will tell you anything and everything you want to know to whatever level is appropriate for you today.
Marty, did you have any conversations with your dad before he got Alzheimer's disease about, his family and how so many people were impacted by the disease?
Yes, a little bit. My parents really chose to, and I don't blame them because they had so much less information at the time. But my parents pretty much chose to ignore it and just have a good life and hope that it wouldn't happen to them. And I think that might be one of the reasons why he didn't have symptoms until much later than most of his cousins. Most of his cousins got sick and passed away with Alzheimer's around age 48 and 55, getting symptoms and then passing away 55, 56 years old. And my dad's still in a nursing home in the final stages at age 66. So I think that was generally how they wanted to handle it. And so we didn't talk much about it in my upbringing.
Yeah, which is understandable. Like you said, it wasn't discussed as openly. I mean, I think we all now speak a lot more about our brains and Alzheimer's than we did in the past. Okay, so there's another question as someone's asking you, do you take supplements? If so, which ones do you take?
I actually don't. My dad took a lot of supplements, and maybe that's why he, lived so long. My focus is on feeling good and being sharp. And so I do enjoy the vitamin D of living in Denver, Colorado with 300 sunshiny days a year. So if we did not live in a lot of sunshine, I would definitely take vitamin D. And vitamin C is always good, and you can't overdose on that. So go ahead and do that all you want. But I tend to just try to eat very fresh and healthy and stay physically fit. And I don't find that I need additional supplements. I know that others do recommend that, but I haven't, for whatever reason, I just haven't really focused on that.
Now, when you talk about participating in the Diane study, how much information do you get back? I mean, I guess you don't really want to know what your genetic status is, but do they give you information back? Are you learning more about yourself and your cognitive abilities by participating in a trial?
It is entirely double-blinded. So technically, we get absolutely no feedback about how we're doing. However, if you went for the same 1 mile run every couple of months, and even if you didn't take a stopwatch, you would gradually know whether or not you're doing well, right? You would gradually feel like, yeah, I'm getting a little faster, or man, I'm getting slower and more sore. And so because we are so regularly tested on things, I'm very aware, almost paranoid about, am I forgetting people's names worse? Am I forgetting my keys and things like that? So we do not get any technical data back. Even at the end of the study, or the end of the drug trial, when we find out about the effectiveness and safety of the drug, we won't find out anything about us individually. We're just finding out how the drug did. So things like that.
Yeah. And how, I mean, once I think you have a parent who's impacted by Alzheimer's, you start to worry about your own brain health and you start to think of your own cognition. I mean, I probably drive my family crazy because I think, oh, I'm forgetting this, what does this mean? But do you notice, and some people describe how, they have a fog over their brains and over their brain, and they can't really tell that the fog was there until like it was lifted, and they took, there was a reason, there was something that was causing it. Are you really super aware of your cognition? Have you seen any signs of decline? I mean, some of it could just be age. They say even when we enter in our, past 35, our memories aren't as sharp as they were in our 20s. So I guess I'm asking, are you like me? Are you, one sign and you're like, oh, what does this mean?
Right. I do tend to be a little bit like that. And my wife does a good job of counterbalancing that and telling me I'm just fine. I do have the benefit of this longitudinal study. Every single year I get flown out to St. Louis to go through the same battery of tests. And each year, I don't know if they remember that I ask, but each year I'll kind of just like build a little rapport with the folks doing it. And I'll ask them, hey, how did I do this year? And they can never tell me, but I can tell that I'm still doing pretty well. And so I'm encouraged because sometimes they will give me the feedback that, man, you're doing better than the vast majority of just the healthy population. So even compared to them, as well as compared to myself, I think I'm pretty sharp still. And I don't think I have that foggy brain yet, but I am like you. I worry about it. And so therefore I see every little mistake. And even now it's worse because the other major thing that the longitudinal Diane study has determined, beyond a shadow of a doubt, is that those plaques and tangles are developing in the Alzheimer's brain 15 to 20 years before you can be actually diagnosed, before symptoms. Yeah. And so here I am at age 40 going, oh man, I forgot another appointment, or, I can't count that money as fast, or whatever. And I do get a little paranoid.
Do you have any siblings, Marty?
I do. I have an older brother, and he found out several years ago that he does not carry the gene mutation.
And what about, like, you mentioned you have so many aunts and uncles, like if there are 14 kids on your dad's side of the family. What about the next generation? Have a lot of them gotten tested? Oh, we seem to have lost you, Marty. I think Marty has just, I think we've lost the internet connection. So what we're going to do is we're going to disconnect and we're going to try to bring him back on. We're almost wrapping up. So we're going to just bring him back on to say a quick goodbye, get some final thoughts. For those of you joining us, thank you. You're back. Yes. Okay. I was just calling to see if you were going to come back. So I guess my question was, what is the next generation, are they all getting tested? Do they want to know?
So far, are you still with me? Can you hear me?
Yeah, we're here.
Okay. So far, each year when we have our X-Men conference, that I like to call it, it's a dyad family conference. Each year I will ask, that very small group of people, how many of you have decided to find out your gene status? And about half the room raises their hand. And so I think it's every time I bring this up with with general population, I get three different groups of people. A large group say, oh, I absolutely would want to know right away. And other people will say, oh, I would never want to know, not in a million years, absolutely not. And then a very small portion are the ones in the middle that say, I'm not sure. So it's a very personal and almost divisive decision because there are just so many ramifications.
Yeah, absolutely. So, what are your hopes? Let's end on what are your hopes for the future? I mean, you're participating in the study. You're now 40 years old. I can imagine that does feel a little bit scary given your family history and the onset of Alzheimer's in your 40s for a lot of your family members. So what is your hope for the future?
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity to share this because I know all of the viewers that are watching right now have not been able to go to the conferences that I go to and speak to the scientists and the pharmaceutical companies and things like that I get to do that with. In fact, I just got back from the World Dementia Council Summit in London, where they had me present my story. And in that room of the very best minds on the whole planet, there is a very strong amount of hope and confidence that we will have a disease-altering treatment in the next 10 years, if not 5 years. And that World Dementia Council Summit was actually a follow-up from the G8 that was in London just 5 years ago, where all the G8 countries made a commitment to having a disease-altering treatment by the year 2025. And so I'm actually very hopeful. I believe this is an exciting time for Alzheimer's and dementia research and pharmaceuticals. And I truly believe that even if we don't have a treatment for me in the next 7 to 10 years, I really believe we will have a treatment definitely for our children and their children.
Well, thank you so much, Marty, for sharing your story. Do you have a website by any chance if people wanted to learn more?
Yes, thank you. I do love speaking about this. And so if anybody knows of an organization that would have me, I would love to do that. And my website is simply my first and last name.com. So martyreiswig.com.
And Reiswig is spelled R-E-I. Go ahead.
Reiswig.
Okay, great. Well, thank you so much for the opportunity to hear your story, and thank you for raising awareness on this issue. We wish you and your family all the best, especially for the holidays and in the longer term. But thank you so much for giving us your time and all of your expertise.
Yeah, no, thank you so much, Deborah. It's been a real pleasure. So thank you for the time.
Okay, take care.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.